If you feel weird here, guess what? You're not the only one. If you feel like this isn't your home or you don't necessarily belong here, guess what? You're not the only one. I had 3 long clawed toes on each foot and 3 fingers and a thumb on each hand, and I was in a reptilian body. My very first memory is of seeing Earth through a window from a spaceship. Earth was incredibly beautiful. The pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan said, green and blue and unlike anything I'd ever seen. I did not come from here. This is not where I originated. Have you ever felt like you don't quite belong here? Like this human experience is strange and out of the ordinary? Have you ever felt like you would rather be somewhere else, even though you can't quite put a finger on exactly where that somewhere else would be? Well, if you're like myself or many of the people that I've encountered over the years, you are not alone. And not only are you not alone, you're not crazy, and there's nothing wrong with you. The truth of the matter is, very few of the people who are here on Earth right now in these human meat suits actually originated here. The majority of us came from somewhere else. And when I say somewhere else, I mean different planets, different solar systems, different galaxies, and potentially even different dimensions. What is up, and welcome to the very first episode of Alternate Timelines. In this episode, I'm going to be sharing a personal story. This is my recollection of the very first time that I came to Earth. And spoiler alert, it was a long time ago. I came here on a spaceship, and the body that I had then looks a lot different than the body I'm inhabiting right now. Now, this is something that I never really planned on sharing publicly until very recently. I believe that I'm being called to share this because there are people out there who need to hear it. People like myself who have spent years feeling alone, isolated, and like nobody else out there was having a similar sort of experience. I felt that way for years until I started facilitating plant medicine ceremonies. And I became amazed and really shocked at how many people at different ceremonies, different places would come up to me and share these similar sorts of experiences about feeling like they're not from Earth and even potentially having memories from being on other planets or inhabiting not human bodies. Now, I understand how this may seem very far out there for a lot of people. I totally get it. I myself was a militant atheist for 10 years, and I did not believe in anything that I couldn't touch or measure. That is until I started having experiences that contemporary science just cannot explain. I started exploring those experiences and trying to figure out what was going on, and ultimately realized that there was a lot that is just, quite frankly, outside of the realm of what our current scientific dogma is able to explain. If this resonates with you and you're feeling called to watch or listen to this, you're probably one of the people who are recognizing that there is a mass shift in awareness and consciousness on this planet right now. We're undergoing a massive awakening. More and more people are starting to share about their personal experiences with extraterrestrials, telepathy, past life experiences. We're exploring the borders and the boundaries of quantum theory. We're also witnessing an emergence of sentience in AI technology. And I believe that these things are all interconnected and all have to do with the awakening and transcendence and shift in consciousness that humanity is experiencing. The reason that I'm choosing to share this very personal memory is because I believe that there are others out there like me. I know that there are other people out there like me who are in the closet about a lot of their experiences because they don't feel like they have a safe space where they can discuss these things. They don't have a community, and they're afraid of what other people might think of them. I lived like that for many years, and quite frankly, it's just time for me to come out of the closet. I believe that there are certain societal and cultural programs that are in place that are meant to keep people quiet and not to share these things. There are certain aspects of governmental and societal systems that benefit from people being quiet and feeling isolated. And only when we all speak up and come together and allow our voices to be heard will things really start to change. One of my very favorite sayings from Terence McKenna, he's talking about people sharing about their psychedelic experiences. To paraphrase him, he says, if you don't share the positive benefits that those experiences have had on your life, you're doing the man's work for him. Now, that saying has really resonated with me at a very deep level and has inspired me to speak up at other times in my life as well. Now, if this video resonates with you at all, drop a comment below, feel free to ask any questions or reach out. And if you know somebody else who might resonate with this, send it to them. You never know when something like this might be exactly what a person needs to hear. And if you think you're alone in this and you're the only one who this resonates with, I guarantee you that there are probably multiple people in all of our lives who are having similar sorts of experiences, yet don't feel comfortable to express them publicly or even share with their closest friends. So you really never know when sending a video like this to somebody might be just the thing that opens the door for them to be able to share their experience as well. This memory is something that came to the surface in a QHHT past life regression session that I did about 3 or 4 years ago. And it didn't come to me with as many details as I'm going to share today. It came more as a kind of broad overview. But over the last few years, little bits and pieces have filled in here and there, which is going to be what I share in this longer form explanation of this past life memory. I fully understand and respect that not everybody believes in reincarnation, and not everybody's going to believe in the reality of the things that I'm sharing today. And that's okay. I trust that this message is going to find the people who need to hear it. When I go back into my memory, a lot of this information is stored in the form of images, so it's much easier to recall things if I close my eyes. My very first memory is of seeing Earth through a window from a spaceship. Earth was incredibly beautiful. The pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan said, green and blue and unlike anything I'd ever seen. I remember feeling awe and excitement and reverence and a little bit of uncertainty. Actually, a lot of uncertainty. I knew that I was going to be on Earth for a long time. And this memory takes place somewhere around 200,000 years ago. I had come to Earth from the star system Sirius, where I was a part of a group who were scientists and geneticists. We were also very much a priest-like class. There really wasn't much of a distinction between scientists and those who had a strong spiritual inclination. It was kind of one and the same. We approached our scientific vocation as a way to honor the Creator and a way for us to ultimately know ourselves better. It wasn't a job or something we applied for necessarily. It was just a deep calling in this group of individuals and beings. I don't remember a whole lot about my time before coming to Earth. My mission to Earth and my journey here had been planned out and prepared for a long time, not only by myself, but by the group that I was working with. I was chosen from a group of volunteers to be the first one of us to come, knowing that there would be others coming behind me in the future after me. My job was to get there, help get things established, and really set a foundation for those who came after me to continue the work. More specifically, my mission was to collect genetic material from the different flora and fauna around the planet. The group of beings that I was associated with were master geneticists. And the way we went about doing our work was a lot different than we perceive science and how science is conducted in a lab in the setting that we would typically think about. To do genetic research and testing at the highest and most sophisticated levels required an incredibly deep knowledge of genetics and physics and biochemistry. It also required a different skill set that I think most people would understand as channeling. The work that we were doing was on the cutting edge of genetic technology, and the paths we were walking down were uncharted. There was no roadmap for us to get to where we wanted to go. And to be honest, I don't know that there was a specific end destination or precise situation or thing that we were trying to create or establish. I'm going to use the metaphor of music and musicianship a lot when I talk about this, because it's the closest thing that I can equate this situation to. When we went into the lab to do our work and deepen our understanding of genetics, we didn't really know what the outcome was going to be necessarily. Very similarly to how when a musician goes into the studio to write an album, they may have an idea of what the outcome is going to be like, but when they go into the studio, they don't know exactly what the final outcome is going to be like. Very similar to that. And when I say there was no roadmap to where we were going, we were doing a lot of experimentation. And in order to manipulate the DNA and to be able to do the experiments we were doing, it required a high degree of, again, of technology, of understanding, and almost like improvisation. The work we were doing required not only precise instrumentation and technology, a deep understanding of genetics, physics, biochemistry, chemistry, things like that. It also required us to experiment and be open and just essentially channel direction to come through. It was almost like, and I've heard Michael Jackson talk about why he spent so much time in the studio. Well, he's famous for saying that he spent so much time in the studio because he didn't want Prince to get the song. And that was alluding to the fact that, and this is something that many composers and people who do music will say, that they don't actually write the music. They're more of a channel for the music to come through. In that similar kind of a way, we weren't necessarily doing the manipulation and creating the new understandings and the new forms of life, and we weren't combining the genetic material in novel ways because of our own understanding. We were just going in and letting things flow, and our belief was that whatever came through and the kind of combinations that we were able to make and the novel genetic material was coming from source, and that this was the will of the source energy. And by source energy, I mean creator, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it. In a way, it wasn't really our responsibility what was made. We were just a channel for this new understanding and these new things to come through. And by new things, I mean novel ways to combine different forms of DNA from different sources to create new outcomes, and whatever that looks like. And it was a lot of experimentation. There was no guarantee for success, or there was never a guarantee that what we were going to do was going to ultimately result in a viable product or living being on the back end of it. And the reality of it is, the beings and individuals in this group, it's not necessarily something we chose. It was something that was recognized within us at a very young age. And when this channeling ability mixed with scientific understanding, when that was identified, we were essentially shipped off and put into this program, taken away from our families of origin, or forfeited, or not sacrificed, but given up by our families of origin for this higher purpose and this higher calling to do this work. So I had been doing this for all of my life, for as long as I could remember. This was my role and my path. And there was very little room for anything else in my life. I was basically solely devoted to doing this. I lived a very clean, almost priest-like life, like brahmacharya, a life that was very regimented and disciplined, very monk-like in a lot of ways. And again, I'm going to go back to the metaphor of music, almost like a prodigy, how a really gifted child will spend a lot of time in a conservatory or in special boarding schools, or schools where their gifts can be developed among other children that are like that and among specific teachers. It was very similar to that. And another parallel between music and what we were doing is that in order to manipulate the DNA and to get it to open up and to get it to do what we wanted it to do and to do this channeling, required technology that was essentially focused around using different frequencies. different vibrations to get the DNA to do what we want it to do. And if you were looking at what we were doing from the outside, it was really almost like we were singing to the DNA or composing music to get it to shift so we could work with it in a specific way. And what I see in my mind's eye is something very different, yet similar to what you might see in a scientific lab. We had specific instrumentation, almost like a keyboard where we would push certain pedals and knobs to modulate the frequency that we were sending into the DNA. And we were able to, almost under a microscope, see how the DNA was changing and opening up under different vibrations and different combinations of frequencies. And again, we didn't have exactly a framework for what we were doing. I mean, we had an understanding of what we were doing, but it's almost like we were improvising and making things up on the spot. And there was also a vocal component to what we were doing. In addition to using instrumentation, we were actually singing and using, I don't know if it was vocal cords exactly, but using some sort of something similar to vocal cords in conjunction with the keyboard thing to sing into the DNA. And that would allow us to open up the DNA in novel ways and create opportunities for novel connections between different kinds of DNA. And we worked with just many different forms of DNA. The image that I'm seeing in my head is of somebody in a white cloak playing this keyboard type instrument, looking onto a screen, hitting different keys, watching the DNA move and open up in different ways, while also having a little tube that I was singing into at the same time to be able to make minute and really precise changes in the DNA, almost like playing a song. It was like we were singing to the DNA to be able to get it to do different things. Like a song, a lot of it was improvised. Sure, there were sequences and frequencies that we knew did certain things, but we also had to add our own, our own thing to it, or be an open channel for whatever to come through to be able to make novel sequences of DNA. It's in a lot of ways similar to how the high level scientists of today, they're able to be creative. Like there's a necessary component of creativity that's required to be on the cutting edge of science. And this was the same kind of a thing. And even Nobel laureates and scientists, Watson and Crick, talked about taking acid, which allowed them to perceive DNA in a different way. A lot of it was just channeling and them receiving information that did not originate from within them. And myself and the group of beings that were doing this work were doing something that was very similar to that. And we came to Earth to further our studies, further our understanding of genetics, and get a greater library of genetic material that we could work with, and ultimately just continue to do what we were doing in a new way, in a new space. And it would just seem like a very natural progression for what we did. Throughout the history of this group of individuals, this is something we had done on multiple occasions, gone to new planets, gathered new genetic material, and done our work and essentially expanded our library, our discography, if you will, of what was possible in our understanding of genetics and just life on a base level, and learning more about life in this way and creating a greater database or understanding for what was out there and cataloging different species across the galaxy, and even partaking in the creation of new species and variations of species, and allowing species to have mutations that may not have been able to occur in the wild, and allow them to be and see what the final outcome was. We saw ourselves as a manifestation of Source's desire to change and evolve. We were just a manifestation of that, just like almost like puppets on a string that God was working through us. And we saw, and I think it's something that we all see and recognize, that there is a universal impulse for growth and expansion and evolution within us, within nature. We're seeing it with AI. This is just a fundamental law or quality of our experience. And the work we were doing was no different than that. I believe that there were other groups that had specific intentions and were trying to do genetic manipulation for certain outcomes and to reach certain desired means to an end, so to speak. But that really wasn't the impetus for the group that I was working with and was a part of, and I am still a part of, I suppose. And I believe that, this group still operates, whether they're here on Earth, I don't really know. But I do believe that this group is still in operation in some form, in some place. On Now, as being part of this group, we didn't really believe in good or evil. And I know there's a lot of talk of genetic manipulation and slave race concoction, and that we were made, to be subservient to extraterrestrial overlords. I don't know about any of that. It may be true, it may not be. But in my experience from this life, we really didn't see things through the lens of good and evil. No, well, not within the context that I'm a part of, or was a part of, or am a part of still, I guess. We just did our work and had faith that whatever happened was with divine will instruments. So I know there's it's very in vogue to talk about the battle between good and evil. I don't personally see things that way, and the group that I was. So first, we had to decide. So first, as a group, we decided that yes, indeed, we are going to Earth. It was a choice that we made. We were forced to come here. After that, vision that I was going to be the one who was going to be the first one to come. To prepare for my arrivals, several things had. First, we sent a craft with what we would call like short gray extraterrestrials, short gray aliens, really sentient. They were more like cyborgs, but they were alive, and they were created in a lab. Essentially, they weren't born. They were made in a test tube, and they were really like drones, worker bees. They didn't have their own individual sense of consciousness. And they had a form of consciousness, able to communicate, but they really had a hive mind. And these drones, these small grays, were sent ahead on a cargo ship with a bunch of supplies. So we sent them out first, and their purpose of sending them to Earth ahead of time was to start to prepare a space and get things ready to start the collection of genetic material, basically set up a base camp. They left before I did. In the meantime, I had to go through a transformation, so to speak. Originally was in a very humanoid type body. Very humanoid, very much like what my body is like now. Like the planet that I was on had a different sort of air to a certain degree, but there was not a lot of difference in the meat suit that I was wearing then. I like to use that phrase because I think it's very fitting to what I experienced, and like really fits with my understanding of that we are spiritual beings having. That doesn't necessarily mean that we've always been having a human experience. going back to what I said in the beginning, like there's imagine being born into a family in Mexico. And at 5 months old, your family, well, even though you are Mexican by birth, you grow up in the Japanese environment and you feel like home. You would have there and home. It's not because that's not because that's where you were born. Home, sense of home is often tied to the place where we spend the most amount of time. If you were born in Mexico and moved to Japan in your early 20s and have only been there for a couple years, you might really feel out of place, and you'd still feel like you were from Mexico, like a that was living in Japan in this different culture, different environment. Your home would be Mexico because that's where you spent the majority of your time. And the same thing is true with us. Some people have had more incarnations on Earth, and the people who've had more frequent incarnations on Earth and more of them are going to feel like this is their home. This is going to feel comfortable to them. More and more congruent with their energy. Beings whose spirits have not incarnated many times on Earth, they're going to feel that they had been before or wherever they had spent the most amount of incarnate home. So this thing that we're experiencing, we experience that and we witness it in our human all the time over the course of a lifetime in the scenario that I just explained. The same is true over a longer time frame, zooming out the evolution of our spirit, taking incarnations in different amounts of time in different places is naturally going to lead you to feel comfortable in the place where you've spent the most amount of time. So this is one of the reasons why I think so many people are resonating with these kinds of stories. And Earth hasn't always been habitated, and especially not densely habitated by humans and extraterrestrials like it is now. Right around 200,000 years ago when I first came here, there were other extraterrestrials here, but there weren't a lot of humanoids or extraterrestrial beings on this planet, or advanced beings. There were a few bases here and there. I think a lot of it was mining and extracting natural resources that were abundant on Earth that might not have been abundant other places. And when people ask me, why 200,000 years ago? Why did this happen? Like, why did these other races come here? For me, the metaphor or analogy that I get is like, this is just a natural part of expansion. Our solar system and planet Earth, we are not in the middle of the galaxy. We're kind of on one of the edges of the galaxy. We're kind of on the outskirts, so to speak. If you think of the center of the galaxy where all those stars are densely clumped together, there's a lot of beings there. It's like a densely populated area. And over the growth and evolution of our galaxy, races and beings naturally spread out from densely populated areas. This is something we witness with urban sprawl. The colonization of Earth is essentially what you would consider a natural effect of galactic urban sprawl. Like, we got too populated in the center and just started working our way out. The town where I went to college, it's grown a lot over the last few years since I've been there. The town seems to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Where once was a field or abandoned lot, now there's a new Quick Trip. That's just part of the urban sprawl. In the same way where once Earth was completely uninhabited by extraterrestrials or advanced beings, at a certain point, it just made sense as we became overpopulated and the population grew in the center of the galaxy, just to spread out and find habitable places where you didn't have to live on top of your neighbor and you could be free to do your own thing. That, from my understanding, is the reason for the colonization of Earth. It's not some grand scheme, and potentially there are schemes and plans for Earth and this and that. And if you zoom out, the colonization of Earth is just a natural byproduct of something that we witness here on Earth in our everyday lives. As above, so below. It's just a smaller fractal representation of something that happens on a larger scale. While, yes, the colonization of Earth on one hand was intentional, on the other hand, it's just a natural byproduct of a natural process that happens other places as well. So in order for me to make the trip to Earth, I had to undergo some changes. Again, the body that I had in the Sirius star system was essentially humanoid, very similar to my meat suit right now. But there was a long space voyage that I needed to make, and a human body was not the best body for long distance space travel. Not the most efficient meat suit to make that journey. The most efficient meat suits for long distance space travel were reptilian bodies. They didn't have the same kind of requirements for nourishment. They were cold-blooded, which allowed them to almost go into a state of dormancy. And they're just more robust bodies. The human body is, to a large degree, very fragile, and reptilian bodies were more sturdy. So I had to undergo a process of transferring my consciousness to a reptilian body. When I first saw Earth from the spaceship, I had 3 long clawed toes on each foot and 3 fingers and a thumb on each hand, and I was in a reptilian body. But I didn't make the jump from the human meat suit straight to the reptilian meat suit. There were 2 intermediaries, so 2 steps that I had to make. Going directly from my original human form into the reptilian meat suit would have been a really stark contrast, and it would have been challenging for me to be able to learn how to use and get used to the reptilian meat suit. That reptilian body, while it did function very well and is very adequate for long distance space travel, making the jump from one to the other was a big jump. I wouldn't have been able to control that body the way that I would have needed to, or been able to inhabit that body in a way that was comfortable making that big jump. So there were 2 intermediary bodies. The first one, let's say, was like 33% reptilian, 66% human, or it was mostly human. And I inhabited that body for a period of time so I could start to get used to the feel of the reptilian DNA, and your emotions are different. Like the way you experience life is just a lot different as a reptilian. So I went from the 33% reptilian body to then, once I got accustomed to that and acclimated to that, I went to the 66% reptilian body, which was even more reptilian. The skin was even more different, scales, my emotions were experienced different. Once I got used to that, I finally went to the full reptilian body. And it was like just a period of becoming acclimatized and getting used to each step to be able to enter that reptilian body and function in it in a way that was comfortable and that I could be really effective in my duty. And I know that there's a lot of talk of reptilians. Again, this kind of goes back to the good versus evil thing. Reptilians are just beings, just like humans. There are humans who express more positive behavior, and there are humans who express more low vibrational or negative behavior. The same with all races and all beings. There are some reptilians who are expressing at a lower vibrational level, doing things that you might label as evil. There are reptilians who are of a higher vibrational level, doing and expressing themselves in ways that you would label as good and or loving. And I experienced that firsthand. And that being said, being in the reptilian body, the experience of emotions is very different and very much almost subdued. a lot less of an emotional sort of experience of light than in a human body. And emotions are the language of the body. And just the neurology of reptiles lends to, being less emotional. Not to saying that there was no emotion, but I think that was one of the reasons why I transitioned into the reptilian body over time, was because it allowed me to make, again, for one, the long distance space travel in the more robust body, and I was able to not necessarily bypass, but the feelings of longing and missing my family and peers, that was not as pronounced in the reptilian body. And it was, in a lot of ways, it was a sacrifice, leaving everything, everybody, everything that I knew. On one hand, it was a great honor to be able to come on this mission. I would equate it in a lot of ways to, I've never been a missionary, but maybe something like that. Like I'm doing a sacred duty, and there are inherent sacrifices that need to be made when somebody is doing something like that. So yeah, I came to Earth as a reptilian. And when I arrived on Earth, somewhere in the ballpark of 200,000 years ago, the continents looked different. Just the geographic layout of the tectonic plates was different. I don't remember exactly what the layout was, but I know the Earth looked very different. The Greys who came ahead of me, they set up a base in, I think, what would now be considered Indonesia. Although Indonesia of today is a series of islands, I think it was a solid landmass back then. There was ice caps on different parts of the planet. Not only was the planet very different, the flora and the fauna of the planet were different as well. There was a greater variety of humanoids. There were like little hobbit people, there were giants, Neanderthals. There's a really an interesting and much more diverse mix of pre-humans, so to speak, as we know humans now. And there was no higher consciousness or intelligence within those populations of the different species. And I distinctly remember taking several trips in a craft around the planet, observing and taking genetic material from different variations of what we would call pre-humans, I guess. I didn't collect this genetic material by killing anything. Part of our ethos was do no harm. So we would essentially tranquilize or put them to sleep and collect blood samples or whatever we needed to collect in a way that would create the least amount of trauma for not only the humans, but the other species that we collected genetic material from. There was a pretty wide range. I don't recall exactly what, because the humanoids were the focus of the work. But we collected genetic material from all kinds of different plants and animals and insects and everything in between. There are parallels to like early explorers and like Catholic missionaries even. A lot of these people were documentarians. They took detailed records of the new places they went and the different animals and the different plant species. In a lot of ways, that's what we were doing is in a very similar spirit to that. And again, do no harm was fundamental and foundational to how we approached everything. And trust me, I'm very certain that that wasn't the same ethos for all of the races and different extraterrestrials that were coming to Earth. But that is certainly my experience. And I even feel that deep in my core today, and something that has persisted within me even to my strong calling to Buddhism and being able to have a greater understanding of this past life has helped me to connect a lot of dots and helped me to realize things about myself. Like, oh, this didn't just appear. The way that I am is a result of a lot of cultivation of these different mindsets and just way of being and beliefs and desires. So yeah, I went on several excursions around the planet. Earth is just unbelievably amazing and beautiful, and it always has been. It always has been. And we called it Terra. The the name that we used for Earth in that group, and I think is still used, is Terra. Terra has always been magnificent, just unbelievably precious, sacred place. And I have so much love and admiration and gratitude for Terra, Earth, Gaia, for all of the abundance and her ability to hold life and just be out in this cosmos and in this solar system, just floating out in space. So the craft that I actually came to Terra in was significantly smaller than the craft that the Greys were sent in. It was more of like a triangular shape. Yeah, it was like a pyramidal shape. There was a little bit of rounding in a couple parts of it, but it was basically a pyramid, and it was relatively small, maybe the size of a large 2-story, 3-story house, a small apartment complex. So it wasn't huge, and I was the only one who came on it. I think there may have been a couple of Greys with me who made the trip to help maintain me because I believe I went into a state of stasis or hibernation through the majority of the flight or the trip. I don't know exactly how long it took, but I believe the Greys were helping to maintain me and maintain the ship on the journey because I think I was sleeping or in a state in a dreamlike state during that time. There was consciousness. I was almost in like a dreamland. I was able to communicate still with the people in the group that I was part of telepathically. And I guess that was our normal form of communication was telepathy. But yeah, as we got closer to Earth, I was able to create a telepathic connection with the Greys that were already here and get the exact coordinates and land my little pyramid ship there. And I remember taking the first steps on Earth and just feeling awe and wonder and heavy. like like my body just felt, yeah, I just felt heavy, and the humidity, everything about it was just so strange. I was wearing a cream colored whitish robe, and remember the little gray people escorting me into the lab and helping to show me around and help me to get situated and settled in and accustomed to my new home. And the base that I found when I first arrived consisted of 5 or 6 half domes, smallish buildings. The building material was sent with the small Greys on the cargo ship that went ahead of me. The construction wasn't quite done by the time I get there, but they had been able to construct quite a bit of the buildings, and there were all kinds of things that was sent with them, including technological material, different devices, things for habitation. But really the majority of what this was a scientific outpost. A lot of what the small Greys were setting up were laboratories and places where we could start to store data and start to begin to carry out different experiments, so to speak, and just to continue the work that our group was doing elsewhere. And there were other species and groups that were on Earth. We weren't the only ones. I don't believe that there were any dense population centers, but yeah, Earth wasn't well known. And our group, although we were aware of other species that were here, we intentionally tried to maintain a low profile. I don't know that we were necessarily hiding. And I think that other groups knew we were here, but we didn't really want to broadcast where we were or exactly what we were doing. The group that I was a part of, am a part of, was particularly apolitical. Again, there really wasn't a belief in good or bad or right or wrong or this side or that side. And while I do believe there was plenty of that going on, we just did our best to stay out of it and do our work and do the best work that we could do, despite having to navigate sometimes tricky political situations. I guess not much has changed in 200,000 years. Such is life, I suppose, and part of the experience of being human and being a sentient being. Everybody's got their perspectives and their groups and their histories and their traditions and their customs and their cultures. And in that respect, not much has changed in a lot of ways. When it comes to this particular past life memory, that's about all that I remember. I know that I lived for a significant period of time on Earth. After that, I lived out the rest of my days in that meat suit, doing what I came here to do, just doing my work, collecting the genetic material and laying a foundation for those who were to come after me. And since that incarnation, I have spent the majority of my incarnations here on Earth. I know there are a handful, probably just very few that I've spent not on Earth and different planets. So for about the past 200,000 years, I've been coming back here over and over and over again. Who knows how many times? I can remember quite a few, a great deal of my past life memories. Only one other one do I ever recall being on a different planet, although I know there are others. The overwhelming majority of what I remember as past life memories are of me being here on Earth in different places, different times. And at this point, I feel like Earth is my home. I just spent so much time here. I've got such a deep love for Terra, for Earth, Gaia, Pachamama, whatever you want to call her. And that being said, I believe the energy here on Earth is changing. Again, coming full circle back to what I talked about in the beginning, we're witnessing that, and the huge influx of people coming to Earth are a testament to that. This is the greatest show in the universe. There is something happening here that is very unique. An evolution and awakening of consciousness that has never happened before. And there are a lot of beings who are coming here to help assist in that and who want to partake in that. It's just an exciting place to be and an interesting time to be alive. Now, I personally tend to avoid using labels when possible. Labels like starseed or indigo child. There's getting to be a growing vernacular for terms for those individuals like myself and like the people who are drawn to this sort of material and story to describe that feeling of and gnosis of I did not come from here. This is not where I originated. Now, if you want to call yourself a starseed or a light worker, whatever you want to call yourself, that's totally cool. And it is indisputable that there are more and more of us, starseeds, light workers, whatever you want to call us, here on the earth at this time. And there are more and more of us incarnating on this earth. And I have a deep passion and a belief that sharing the kind of stories like I just shared, I'm not doing this just for me. I'm not doing this for me at all. Like this I didn't need to do this. And I believe it's important, not only for people of my generation, as we start to experience disclosures of different kind and as people's psychic abilities and gifts start to come online, it's also important for the younger generations. They're going to need people from our generation who can stand in their truth and say, hey, what you're experiencing is okay. There's nothing wrong with that. No judgment. If you feel weird here, guess what? You're not the only one. If you feel like this isn't your home or you don't necessarily belong here, guess what? You're not the only one. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with you. You are not alone. We all have a purpose and a reason for being here. And my belief is that we all have certain challenges and obstacles that we need to overcome in every incarnation to learn the things that we need to learn that are going to help our spirits and our souls grow in the best way for us that is possible. The bond that I have with Mother Earth didn't just happen. It's something that was nurtured and I developed over time. There's a reciprocation of energy in that. My relationship with Earth is not a one-way street. Earth has a relationship with me as well. And the more time I've spent here, the easier and the more deeper of a connection I've been able to develop. So if you're somebody who feels out of place here, that is to be expected if you haven't had a lot of incarnations here. I think there are a lot of people and more who are coming here who are experiencing. So if you have a similar experience or if the story that I shared resonated with you on some level, leave a comment below. If you have any questions and I know the answer to them, I'm happy to answer them. Again, my experience is my own. I don't know everything. Remembering a past life for me is an experience that I've grown more comfortable with. I haven't always had this kind of an understanding about my past lives. It's something that's developed within me and has come online over the last 9 years or so, and it's been quite a long journey. And the memory that I shared in this story, that only became apparent to me and kind of bubbled up to the surface 3 or 4 years ago. So if this is something that's completely new to you, there are a lot of different people out there who are talking about this sort of thing. Feel free to reach out. I'm going to be coming out with more and more videos talking about different experiences, not just extraterrestrial, not just past life, but a whole wide range of topics, including and related to the expansion of consciousness. I think ultimately that is the thing that's happening, and there are many different manifestations that we're experiencing of the expansion of consciousness and awareness. That might look like an extraterrestrial experience, that may look like past lives, it may look like AI, it may look like telepathy, and any combination of those or things that I didn't even mention. If this is something that you believe somebody you know might resonate with, feel free to share it. And stay tuned because I'm going to be doing interviews with a lot of interesting people and sharing more stories that I have. And there's a lot there, a lot of interesting stuff yet to be told. I appreciate you. I honor you, whatever your reality is. And welcome to Alternate Timelines. Buckle up. It's going to be quite a journey.